So this is quite a stack of books for 1 week, but there's an explanation for that. Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do my reading wrap up for the week of May the 28th to June the 3rd, I think I've got my dates right. And this week I read 6 books plus 7 books that were junior readers for school. That's why there's so many in my stack. So that came to a total of 2,835 pages, and I think I'm now up to 111 books for this year. Without further ado, here are the books that I read this week. The first book I read was Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. You might recall that earlier in May I read The Upside of Unrequited, and then I went out and picked up this book and read this one, basically. So I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. If you're not familiar with the story, it is about Simon, who is a 16-year-old boy who is beginning to work out who he is and where he fits in the world, and he is having a email conversation with a boy named Blue. One day these emails between Simon and Blue fall into the wrong hands and everything goes awry, and Simon is left trying to figure out what he's going to do next and how he fits in the world. This obviously fits into the LGBTQI plus books, and it was fabulous. Absolutely loved it. If you haven't picked it up, highly recommend you do that. Next up, I read the graphic novel adaptation of A Wrinkle in Time by Marie Langles, and I can never ever say that name. Does anyone know how to say it? Let me know in the comments. This was adapted and illustrated by Hope Larson. It wasn't bad, but I don't know, story didn't grab me. It is the story of 3 children who are swept up in an interplanetary mission by 3 mysteriously otherworldly figures, and they have to travel via Tesseract to different worlds, and they're trying to stop this shadow, which is threatening the entire universe. I'm reading it as part of my science fiction reads for June. Glad I read it. Interesting read, but I think I only gave it about 3 stars. Next I read Queens of Geek by Jen Wild, and this was another 5-star read for me. I absolutely adored this. This is the story of Charlie, who is a YouTube vlogger, and she is an Asian Australian bisexual girl. She travels overseas to a convention with her best friend Charlie, who also has Asperger's and very high anxiety, as well as their friend Jamie. This is an Own Voices book as well, I believe, and it was absolutely charming. I adored this. It was fun and geeky. Again, where were these books when I was growing up? Because there were so many different things that my younger self would have identified with, and let's be honest, some of my current older person self as well. I love this. This came in my YA Chronicles Pride Month box, and it was fabulous. Definitely pick it up if you see it. Then I read Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which is obviously the novel adaptation of the film, and I really enjoyed this. The one thing I like about the Star Wars books, particularly the novelizations, is that you get a little bit deeper into characters' headspaces where you don't necessarily in the films, because the films tend to move quite quickly and you don't really get to understand people's motivations. And this was fantastic for understanding Jin's motivations and the struggle that she has with her father that she barely knew, and her understanding and the way that she interacts with the rebellion. Really enjoyed it. Definitely worth a read if you're a Star Wars fan. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And interestingly enough, inside this particular story, most of it is actually narrative, but there are also some emails and memos and bits and pieces from different characters throughout the story, which add additional insight, which I liked. Then I read The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. This one I completed for my Emoji-a-thon TBR, and this was the 2016 and 2017 release. Obviously there were mixed reviews about this all over the place. I actually really liked it. I liked the storyline, dystopian set in space, genetically engineered people masquerading as real people. It was fun, it was violent, and I know that that's really strange putting those 2 descriptions in the same sentence, but that's what I like. I like my action books. That definitely fit into this. The writing style I felt at times felt a little bit childish, but at the same time I also think it worked for this story. I really like Nemesis as a character, as she's struggling to understand where she fits and she's questioning herself and her identity. And my favourite character in this was Tyrus, and was from the very first second that he entered the book, because I found him to be very intriguing. Overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I'm very curious to see what happens next in the series, because I thought this was a standalone book, but apparently it's a trilogy now, and I think the next book is called The Empress, so I'm very curious to read that. Then, completely randomly, I read a whole bunch of little junior novels that we got in at work for our reading groups, so I'm not going to go too too much into them, I'll just tell you the titles because these are all about 45 pages long. I think the longest one was maybe 65 pages long. So there's one called Pterophytosaurus Rex, Hippopotamus. Those are both by Mark Dumbleton. The Big Bad Wolf Story and a Play, and Put a Cockroach in My Muesli, Poems About Food, both by Jill McDougall. Attack by Josephine Croser. And my two favourites out of those 7, the rest of they're pretty just stock standard stories for young readers, were these two, Four in a Log and When the Sun Would Not Shine. And these are by John Dennison Clark, and they are traditional story retellings. So Four in a Log, I believe, is based on a Hindu myth, and When the Sun Would Not Shine is based off a Japanese Shinto myth. And I just found these ones to be really good, so I'm glad that these ones will be on the shelf for the kids to read. I didn't go give those ratings or anything, they're just things that I read for work. And then the last book that I read for myself this week was Lifespan of Starlight by Talia Kalkipsakis. I really enjoyed this one. This was for my Read a Book in 24 Hours Emoji-a-thon challenge, and it is the story of 3 teenagers who discover the ability to time travel. They begin to jump forwards in time, first only a few seconds and then building their way up. It's interesting, this book was set in Melbourne, which I didn't realise going into it, so it was really fun reading about places that I knew but set in this sort of futuristic dystopian-ish type world where everyone is basically microchipped and everything. Your whole identity is stored on a chip in your wrist and you require that to do basically anything. Our main character, Scout, and we meet her, is an illegal, so she was never chipped when she was born, and so her and her mother have to live off the rations of just one person. She eventually becomes part of a group of teenagers who start trying to master time travel, and it's dangerous, it's illegal, and eventually this catches up with them. And it was quite an interesting read. The first part is a little bit slow. It's very much sort of setting up the story. I think this is the first book in a trilogy or a series, and you really do. You get a lot of setup about what the world is like, why Scout is the way she is, why she thinks the way she does. Then about halfway through, the pace really picks up and you start to become more invested in what exactly is going on with these characters. I won this in a Goodreads giveaway last year. I'm so glad that I finally had a chance to read it. Worth a read if you see it, because hey, love Oz YA, excellent. So those are the books that I read this week. I'm quite impressed with myself getting through these. I'm really excited because I'm moving into a few more of my Emoji-a-thon science fiction reads now, although I do have other books to break it up this month, so I'm excited about that. In the comments, let me know the last book that you finished as well as the book that you're currently reading. I'm just looking to add more things to my TBR as usual. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.